Good afternoon everyone, and here we are in the spooky shed of horror. I'm going to do something completely different today, and I'm going to be reading you a short story from the book that I have written, which is called Ordo Strigoi Vii, which is the living vampire. And that's what it's all about. And there, of course, on the back cover is yours truly. Ordo Strigoi Vii, the Vampire Journal. Poems and short stories about vampires from the old world to the modern day. Intended to make you question your own mortality, and for you to ponder if these creatures of the night actually exist. Penned while in Whitby in North Yorkshire, the birthplace of Dracula in England. Whitby lends itself nicely with its incredible atmosphere along those old cobbled roads, with smoke mingling and appearing to dance in the streetlights like ethereal spirits. Colin's here with me, as you can see, and here is my magic wand. And I say it's magic because it's mystic. Right, guys and girls, this story is called Nathaniel. And here we go. I hope you don't mind me reading from the book, because I don't know it off by heart yet. It was the year 1899. The date was the 29th of October, and I was 28 years old. My name is George Edward Green, and this is my story. I found myself in the old fishing port of Whitby, which is situated on the northeastern coast of England. I had come from my native West Yorkshire home in Huddersfield to start out on a new adventure in life, in a new town, and I could not think of anywhere better to be. I had come in search of Whitby jet, which had become part of the mourning attire for Queen Victoria, after the sudden death of her husband Prince Albert in 1861. There was money to be made from Whitby jet, and also from the many fossils that were to be found along the coastal road between Whitby and Ravenscar. There was one particular night which was very dark and stormy. The wind was blowing a gale. As it came in across the North Sea, there were ships within the harbour walls which were being tossed and blown around like pieces of cork. However, they did have much more protection than those who were out on sea, having to sail through mountainous waves, which came ashore crashing and thundering into the harbour entrance between those twin piers. Both lighthouses shone on their messages of warning to the ships of their impending doom on the rocks, as they were tossed and blown towards the shore. The wind was driving fiercely over the harbour walls, and was causing the sand to move in a most unusual way, causing a serpentine pattern to undulate and arch as it moved across the beach. I was staying in an old fisherman's cottage on Henrietta Street, which is known locally as Pier Cottage. The cottage always looked as though it were shrouded in an eerie smoke, which comes from Fortune's Kipper smoking house, just as it must have had since William Fortune started the smokehouse in 1872. Sometimes the smoke that gathers around the old streetlights has the appearance of some ethereal spirit dancing in the night. There was a window in the cottage which led out onto a balcony overlooking Tathill Sands. And that is the place where in Bram Stoker's book written in 1897 about Count Dracula, the ship Demeter had run aground. During a violent storm, not unlike the storm which was raging that night, waves were crashing like thunder into the breakwaters and great plumes of spray were sent high into the night air. The wind was howling, making a very eerie sound, as it seemed to have a ghostly noise as it passed through the red pantiled rooftops. Although I felt very comfortable in my cottage, I had a strange feeling of uneasiness because of the violence of the storm outside. I lit some candles and threw some driftwood logs on the fire, which spat and crackled as the flames took hold. They brought a warm but eerie glow into the cottage, as though dancing across the walls. The icy wind which blew in from the North Sea brought hail, which tapped against the window pane, tap, tap, tap. Lightning flashed across the bay and appeared to be quenched in the seething cauldron which was the sea. I sat down in front of the fire which was roaring away, and as I observed the flames, they were being reflected into the polished brass of the fender around the hearth. I took some old twist tobacco from my pouch, cut a length of it off with my pocket knife, which had a whalebone handle, no doubt a relic from the days when the whaling fleet used to set out and harpoon those giant creatures of the deep and return with their catch, which was used for a variety of things. I placed the tobacco between the palms of my hand and I gently rubbed it before packing it into my clay pipe. I put a taper into the flames, and as it lit I put it to my pipe and began to draw on it until the tobacco was alight. I blew the smoke towards the ceiling with some satisfaction. As I listened to the howling of the wind and the constant tapping of the hail on the window pane, I felt very much at ease with my surroundings. I poured myself a large glass of whisky from an old decanter and sipped at it, savouring every drop. I felt a total and complete calm fall over me in the midst of such a violent storm outside my window. I gazed into the fire and began to drift away. The wind continued to howl and the hail tapped on the window pane, and my mind began to think of all the poor souls who were out on the sea that night. I must have drifted off into sleep, and as I awoke to what sounded to be a more insistent tapping at the window pane, I stared through my sleep-dulled eyes, and I could see what appeared to be a man stood there, tapping on the glass. My eyes regained their focus, and I could see that he was a very tall man and gaunt in appearance, dressed from head to foot in black with a cloak, which had its collar up against the wind. Looking down to his feet, he had a pair of black shoes, and they looked to have mud on them. I observed his hands, which were very slender, with long pointed fingernails. He had sunken cheeks. His eyes were as black as Whitby jet and appeared lifeless. Even on the occasion that the moonlight caught them from behind the passing clouds, there was no sparkle, just cold, dead eyes. His hair, which was shoulder length and straight, was jet black in colour again, shining in the moonlight. The blackness of his hair framed a very pale complexion. He stood there, one hand tapping at the window, the other hand hung by his side. He carried on tapping at the window pane and stared at me with those dark eyes, which I must say was unnerving. I knew not what he was seeing, as he appeared to be looking me up and down from top of my head to my feet. He also looked into all the corners of the room, tap, tap, tap on the window. I was unable to avert my eyes, and I felt compelled to look into his eyes, which seemed to be looking directly into my soul. I was transfixed and could do nothing but obey his will, and I walked towards the window. I did try once to avert my eyes, but he seemed to have me hypnotised. He reached out his arm and held up his hand. His finger beckoned me to come and open the window. I noticed that even though the wind howled around him, he remained motionless. Not even a single hair on his head was moving. My hand stretched out towards the catch of the window, and I was powerless to do any other than what he had willed. I opened the catch and slowly opened the window and felt obliged to say, "Please enter the room." He stepped through into the room and he seemed to glide over towards the fire, and he stood by the mantelpiece. He sat opposite me in the fireside chair and stared at me with those dark and strangely dead eyes. He said, "My name is Nathaniel, and I have been in Whitby for what seems like centuries. I often wander the cold streets at night looking for people who are willing to invite me into their home. It is such a foul evening out there, and you are so kind to have let me in to share the warmth and to give me company. I would like to offer to you the chance to join me on the journey of an eternity." He walked around the room. Well, when I say walked, he appeared to glide wherever he went. "This journey will give you everything, but it will also cost you everything. So tell me, would you care to come with me?" I was not sure, and I wanted to know more of this journey. I asked Nathaniel to tell me more and offered him a drink of my fine malt whisky. Nathaniel said, "Thank you so much, but I never drink wine or spirits." I offered him something to eat to warm him up, but Nathaniel told me he had already eaten. The room was bathed in candlelight, and the glow from the fire was very, very cosy, and we chatted about this journey he had spoken of. Nathaniel told me of his travels around the world in times past, of his visits to the opera houses of Milan, the ballet theatres of Paris, the playhouses of London. This before he decided to live in the quaint old seaport of Whitby. His story was fascinating, and one which certainly caught my imagination. This man had done and seen more than most people could ever dream about. I said, "Yes, I will join you on that journey, because you have excited my mind, and you could open up that world to me." Then, as if from nowhere, he was stood directly in front of me, with those dark but dead eyes looking directly at me. He towered above me. I looked upon his face, which was deathly pale. His thin lips parted to reveal what looked like fangs protruding from the upper jaw. His face was emotionless, and I was powerless. I could only stare into those jet black eyes. He reached forward and placed a hand upon my shoulder, while the other remained at his side. The hand on my shoulder had a touch which was so gentle that I could scarcely feel it there at all. My heart began to race at the sight before me, so scary yet so compelling in the candlelight. I had never met anyone like him before. Then he stooped, and I could smell the aroma of the grave upon his skin. He sniffed at my flesh and breathed in deeply before moving closer until his cheek was touching my cheek. He was as cold as marble, like one who was dead. He then moved towards my neck. It was then I felt those fangs sink deep into my vein, followed by the sound of him drinking my life's blood. I could hear him sigh with deep satisfaction. The last thing I remember was passing into blackness. I awoke the very next evening after the sun had gone down. The night was calm and the violent storm of the previous day had passed inland across the North Yorkshire moors. I looked out across the bay through the twin piers. The lighthouses were flashing out their warning to the ships, warning of the dangerous rocks awaiting them should they stray too close to the shore. It was just like any other evening, with the exception that I had woken with an incredible thirst for human blood. I wanted to go out on those cobbled streets, into the town and into the dark alleys. There were so many of them in Whitby, and they all had their hiding places. As I walked down Argument's Yard, I found my first victim. He was on his way home after spending a few hours at the White Horse and Griffin Inn. I dispatched him into the jaws of death. Nathaniel had gone somewhere into the night after starting me out on this eternal journey. He left behind a vampire. And there you go, guys and girls. My short story, Nathaniel. If anyone is interested in my books, I have 8 books in total. They are all for sale on Amazon, ranging between $7.99 and $12.99. However, if you would like one and you choose to buy it from me personally, then they're £5. I've been asked to do 2 sets of performance poetry in October. One for the Make-A-Wish Foundation, which is a charity for terminally ill children, I believe. And that is at the Terrace in Dewsbury, and I think it's the 29th of October. No, tell you a lie, it's the 8th of October. And I've asked also to do some more performance poetry at Leeds Spook Festival, which is on the 29th of October. And that is under the Dark Arches by Leeds Railway Station. So if anyone would like to come along and support me, that would be absolutely brilliant. So on that note, my family and friends, 423 members of the Jenky family now, thank you so much. I hope you've enjoyed that story. And at that point I will say, as always, Namaste. May your God go with you. Bye for now, everyone.